The hardest thing about forming a violin collection has been finding the kinds of instruments I wanted to buy. Some people collect a lot of instruments, lots of different kinds, but I always wanted the finest specimens available. And they don't come on the market every day. You have to wait for somebody to die. For example, I got the Lord Wilton del Jesu only when Lord Menuhin died, because he certainly wouldn't have sold it while he was alive. And that freed up a lot of other instruments. So you have to be opportunistic to do that. The first good instrument I bought was my little Petrus, which is in this show, which I bought in 1980, thereabouts. And at the time I bought it, it cost more than the mortgage on my house. I went down and took out a loan to buy the violin. That's how nutty you get about these things. And it actually was worth more than the house I was living in. That was my first violin, and it's taken me from 1980 until now to finish the collection. Now, what I have done when I've taken violins into the collection, I have, in the first instance, had them set up exactly right, because sometimes they come in having been not cared for quite right. And then, having had them fixed up so they're perfect, then I leave them alone at that point. Keep them in a nice temperature-controlled environment and see to it that they're cared for. Violins are not immortal. They're very long-lived, but they're not immortal. Stradivari made perhaps 1,200 violins in his lifetime, they estimate. Of those violins, between 500 and 600 still exist. That's not very many. We don't know how many Del Jesus there were to begin with. There are only about 140 of those that exist. And you know, things happen to these instruments. People use them, artists use them, and actually the best way to turn a prime specimen and one that's in unique condition into an average one is to let someone use it as a concert artist for 50 years. You know, there's something unique about violins. I can't name another 300-year-old object that is used actively in practicing a profession. There is no other thing that's like that. It is true that you can buy a 300-year-old painting and hang it on the wall. You take the Mona Lisa, put it behind bulletproof glass, but you don't use it in practicing a profession. Using a violin is a very intimate thing. You take the instrument, you put it under your chin, you interact with it, you get the oils from your body on the instrument. Sometimes you sweat on it. Things happen to a violin when you're playing it. You nick the edge with the bow, or you get rosin on the top. Preserving them is an important thing. The instruments in my collection I've divided into two different categories, really. There are instruments which are wonderful, wonderful concert instruments which really should be played and heard. And the reason I feel that way is because they're not in uniquely pristine condition. They're in very fine condition, but not as they came from the maker's hands. I think there are a few unique specimens, like the Lord Wilton, like the Bass of Spain, like the great La Pucelle Stradivari, that should be preserved and not played heavily. They should be heard once in a while, but not used day in, day out, many hours a day in pursuing a concert career. Why? Because my goal as a collector is that in 100 years' time, somebody will be able to look at that violin and say, oh, I get it. That's what it was all about. I don't think anyone has ever put together something that documents both the appearance and the sound of these instruments. Now, if you did this 20 years from now or 100 years from now, the instruments would be different. They will have gone through a series of owners, they'll have gone through maintenance operations and so on. It seemed to me that it was worthwhile preserving what these instruments looked like and sounded like when we did the show. It's sort of like a fly in amber. I mean, it is a historical document. Here we have all these instruments collected together. It's hard to collect them, and you have the opportunity to compare them back to back, and it just seemed to me to be a historical document in some ways. Also, I don't believe, I've been very impressed with the crew we had, and I don't believe that violins have ever been photographed as well, certainly not in a movie. I think that you really see with the quality of photography and with the quality of the equipment that was used, what they really truly look like. For example, we did one of the shots of each instrument is the instrument rotating around with side lit. Well, you can actually see the arching. You know, if you see a photograph of a violin in a book, you see the front, side, and back at best. Well, you can see the whole violin as it rotates. You can see the arching and the subtlety of the shape of the instrument. And I think that's very cool. I just think that it is a way of passing a legacy on. It's a way of allowing people in 100 years' time to see what these instruments looked like and sounded like then. I grew up admiring 4 great violinists. There's Isaac Stern, there's David Oistrakh, there's Nathan Milstein, and Jascha Heifetz. Those were my gods growing up. And Jimmy, I think, somewhat channels Oistrakh. He has the same kind of serious, intense approach to the music, and he is a perfect choice of somebody to demonstrate the collection. Another thing about it that's very cool is that Jimmy is one of the very few violinists that can switch from instrument to instrument to instrument. Now, what he did in making this recording was extraordinarily difficult. You could count the violinists on one hand that could do that. There are some violinists that think they can switch from Strad to Del Gesù and viola and so on, but they can't really. But Jimmy really can. How to preserve the collection? I have a new theory. What I think is that if you have bought a violin for millions of dollars, you're going to be very careful of that instrument if you have actually laid out your money to buy it. So my current thinking is the best way to preserve the instruments is to sell them for a heck of a lot of money, because then whoever buys them will appreciate them. On the other hand, I guess you could argue that my objectives are well filled by that too, my own personal objectives.
Instruments go in and out of collectors' hands and institutions and to players and whatnot. But a collection like this, to have all these instruments all in the same place and all in perfect playing shape. Let's not forget the incredible contributions of John Becker to this project. I mean, he set up these instruments to the peak of their abilities. And to have all these amazing instruments set up so well in a beautiful concert hall with a top-notch recording crew, top-notch film crew. I mean, it's the sort of thing that even if someone wanted to and had the time and financial resources to try to make it happen, it might never be able to happen again quite this same way. So I feel like right place, right time. You know, it was an amazing thing to be involved with it. I'll never forget it.